All right, ready to get this creative juices flowing? Today, we're taking a deep dive into tangible thinking. You sent us some fascinating excerpts from a book, Tangible Thinking OS by Sanjeev Sirpal. He's a designer who calls himself a near futurist. I have to say, the idea of making thoughts tangible really piqued my interest.
It's a fascinating concept for sure. And it actually aligns with a lot of research on how our brains work. There's a whole field called embodied cognition,
Hmm.
really explores how our physical actions,
Yeah.
like how we interact with the world around us, actually influences our thinking.
So, like how we use our hands could actually shape our thoughts.
Okay, I'm hooked already. But for our listeners tuning in for this deep dive, what's the big takeaway here? What's the value of exploring this tangible thinking?
Well, it seems like this deep dive is going to give us some
Yeah.
real practical techniques for kind of unlocking creative potential. We're going to look at how to escape all those digital distractions. Serpil actually calls it a war for our attention. And then rediscover the power of analog tools, pen and paper, sketching. Using those to shape our ideas into something real. I've got to admit, I'm feeling a little screen fatigue myself. So, yeah, count me in. So, Serpil starts by laying out this problem. He calls it stolen focus. What's he getting at there?
Well, he argues that technology, while it offers us incredible connection and information, it also bombards us with content that's designed to keep us hooked. He paints this picture of billion-dollar companies using algorithms to compete for every second of our attention.
It's like everyone wants a piece of our brain space these days, right? But what's the real downside to this constant distraction? Why should we even care about this stolen focus?
Well, Serpil believes that this fragmented attention makes it really difficult to focus on our own thoughts. If we're always reacting to external stimuli, we lose that quiet space for inspiration to kind of spark and ignite.
So basically, we're trading our creative potential for endless scrolling. That's a pretty sobering thought. But this is where tangible thinking comes in, right? What's the solution that he's proposing?
He suggests that we move our ideas from our heads to our hands, using simple analog techniques. The act of physically engaging with our thoughts, whether it's through writing, sketching, even just holding an index card, it can help us break free from all that digital noise and unlock a different kind of creative flow.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture. But I am curious about the specifics. What are some of the benefits that Serpil highlights in the book?
He mentions overcoming creative blocks, that initial blank page, or even when you're struggling to synthesize a bunch of different ideas. He also argues that handwriting and sketching actually improve our memory and understanding compared to typing. And he even suggests that by engaging in this process, we develop our own unique personal style, our own mind mark, he calls it.
Mind mark. That's a cool concept. But before we get too far ahead, let's step back to the core principles of this tangible thinking idea. What are the foundational ideas that he's building on?
He lays out three core principles. First one is that creativity is an essential part of being human. It's not some special talent reserved for a select few.
Yeah.
It's in our DNA.
I love that. Everyone has that potential to be creative.
Exactly. The second principle is that creativity transforms not only our ideas, but also ourselves. That act of creating changes us, helps us learn and grow.
So it's almost like creativity is a form of self-discovery.
Beautifully put, yeah. And the final principle is that there's this tension between creativity and productivity. Serpil argues we need to learn to oscillate between the two. Sometimes we need to be in that expansive idea-generating mode, and other times we need to focus on bringing those ideas to life.
It's like finding that right rhythm between dreaming and doing.
So we're all creative beings, deep down.
Deep down, yeah.
But I think a lot of us struggle to tap into that creative energy.
Oh, for sure.
We get bogged down with work, deadlines, just life in general.
Life gets in the way.
Exactly.
It happens.
So where does Serpil take us from there?
That's where his idea of the creativity-productivity spectrum comes in.
Okay.
It's fascinating, really.
Lay it on me.
He argues that the more we focus on one,
Yeah.
the more it costs us the other.
So if I'm hyper-focused on checking things off my to-do list,
Yeah.
I'm actually stifling my creative potential.
Exactly. Think about it.
Okay.
When you're in that get stuff done mode,
Yeah.
your brain is laser focused on execution,
Right.
on efficiency.
Makes sense.
There's not a lot of room for those what if questions. Those sparks of inspiration that fuel creativity.
So it's like our brains are stuck in overdrive,
Yes.
and our creative minds can't get a word in edgewise.
Precisely. And on the flip side,
Okay.
when you're in that creative flow state,
Uh-huh.
it's hard to be super productive.
I see.
You're exploring, experimenting, letting those ideas wander.
Right?
Deadlines and to-do lists kind of fade into the background. But to tap into that creative mode, Serpil talks about something called mind ramps. What exactly are those?
He describes them as specific activities that help us shift into a more creative state by changing our physical state or our sensory input.
Okay, that's interesting. What are some examples of these mind ramps?
Well, one that he mentions is taking a shower. He calls it the white noise mind. The idea is that the constant sound of the water helps clear your mind and creates space for new thoughts. Another one is walking, which he calls the walking mind. That rhythmic motion and change of scenery can really stimulate creativity.
Oh, I can definitely relate to that one. Some of my best ideas come when I'm out for a walk.
He also suggests closing your eyes for visualization, calling it the eyes closed mind, which can help us tap into our imagination. And he even talks about photography as a way to practice mindful observation, the eyes open mind, encouraging us to see the world with fresh eyes.
Those are some great examples. I think we all have certain activities that help us get into that creative groove. It's really fascinating to see how he connects these physical actions to our mental state. But then he goes on to talk about this trinity of tools for tangible thinking. What's so special about these tools?
Well, he considers them the essential toolkit for putting tangible thinking into practice. First, we have the pen. He calls it the primary interface between our mind and body. And he even suggests that different types of pens can actually subtly influence our thinking. He talks about felt tip markers, ballpoint pens, fountain pens, each with their own unique feel and flow.
So it's not just about putting pen to paper, it's about finding the right pen for the job.
Exactly. The second tool in the Trinity is surprisingly simple. It's the 3x5 index card. He calls it the ideal cognitive surface for capturing what he calls atomic thoughts.
Index cards, that seems almost too basic. What's so special about them?
Their power is in their simplicity and their versatility. They've been around for over 300 years for a reason. The book even mentions how they were originally used by Carl Linnaeus, the father of taxonomy, to organize his vast knowledge of plants. Index cards allow for quick capture of ideas, easy rearranging, and they don't require any technology to use.
So it's back to basics again, finding power in simple tools. What's the final tool in this trinity?
The final tool is the mark, which is all about handwriting and sketching, as a way to make our thoughts tangible. Serpil believes handwriting has this unique ability to shape our understanding and improve memory, much more so than typing. He encourages us to experiment with different styles and find our own unique mind mark. It's like a signature style for how we visually capture our thinking.
I am loving this mind mark idea. It's like a fingerprint for our creativity.
So how do we find that balance?
Well,
Is it even possible to be both creative and deep productive?
that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
Serpil's answer is tangible thinking. His 5-stage method for unlocking creative potential while still getting things done.
I like it.
He starts with stage 0,
Stage 0.
called mind.
Why not just start with 1?
I think it's brilliant, actually.
Okay.
He's highlighting the importance of creating space.
Got it.
Space for creative thinking.
That breathing room we were talking about.
Exactly. And he makes this distinction
Mhm.
between the consuming brain and the creative mind.
So it's like our brain is that taskmaster, always on the go,
Yeah.
while our mind is that quiet observer waiting for the right moment to chime in.
That's a great way to put it.
Awesome.
And Serpil argues that in today's tech-driven world, our brains are getting way too much stimulation. All those notifications,
Right.
emails, social media feeds.
Ugh, it never ends.
It's like a constant barrage of information.
Yeah, and that leaves our poor minds exhausted with no energy left to create.
Exactly.
So the first step is to create space for the mind to breathe, to quiet that internal noise,
That's step 0.
which leads us perfectly to stage 1,
Okay.
capture.
This is where the trinity comes into play, right? Pen, index cards, our unique mind mark. Time to get those thoughts out in the open.
Precisely. The capture stage is about offloading those thoughts onto paper with as little friction as possible. No overthinking, no editing, just letting those ideas flow freely.
So even those half-baked ideas, those fleeting thoughts we usually brush aside, those are worth capturing too.
Absolutely. You never know where a creative spark might lead. Tell me more about this mind-breathing thing.
Yeah.
It sounds almost meditative.
It is. Serpil's idea is that to make room for new thoughts,
Yeah.
we need to offload the existing ones.
Okay.
Imagine exhaling stale air
Okay.
to make room for fresh oxygen.
I'm with you.
Mind breathing is about getting those nagging thoughts, to-dos, and anxieties
Yeah.
out of your head and onto paper.
So it's like a mental decluttering process.
It is.
But why paper? Can't we just use our phones or laptops to jot things down?
You could,
But
but Serpil's a big advocate for analog tools here.
interesting.
Pen and paper, index cards. He argues that digital tools, while great for productivity,
Huh?
have a high index of distraction.
So those tempting notifications and pop-ups
Yeah.
are actually pulling us out of that creative flow state.
Exactly. With pen and paper, you're fully present in the moment.
I see.
Focus solely on capturing those thoughts without the digital distractions.
Interesting.
He calls it creating an idea loop.
Okay.
Exhale the old ideas by writing them down.
Right.
Then inhale fresh inspiration in the space you've created,
I like that.
giving our minds permission to wander
Yeah.
without getting bogged down by the brain's to-do lists.
Okay, so we've cleared some space and captured those fleeting thoughts.
We have.
What happens in stage 2, Seed?
This is where the real magic starts to happen. You go back to what you've captured,
Okay,
but you look at it with fresh eyes.
got it.
It's about sifting through those thoughts, looking for patterns,
Right.
identifying the seeds of ideas that resonate with you.
So it's not just about mindlessly jotting things down.
No, not at all.
It's about actively engaging with those thoughts
Yes.
and seeing what sparks our interest.
Right. You're looking for those nuggets of inspiration, those aha moments.
Yeah.
That make you think, there's something here
Okay,
worth exploring further.
I like that.
It's like panning for gold.
Okay.
You're sifting through the dirt to find those precious nuggets.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So we've captured our thoughts, identified those promising seeds.
Right.
Where do we go from there?
That takes us to stage 3,
Okay.
incubate.
Incubate. This is where we go beyond that initial spark and begin to explore and develop our chosen ideas using different frameworks and techniques.
So it's about transforming those raw thoughts into something more substantial. What kinds of techniques does he suggest?
Well, he talks about visual brainstorming, creating mind maps, even building prototypes. It's a very hands-on approach, using both words and visuals to really flesh out those ideas and explore their potential.
This is where that visual literacy we talked about earlier comes in, right? Using design principles to organize and develop those thoughts. Be the most crucial stage of all.
Ooh, interesting.
This is where we shift from
Right.
actively thinking
Yeah.
to patiently waiting,
Okay.
letting those seeds germinate and grow.
So we're not supposed to force it, just trust the process?
Exactly. It's about giving those ideas time and space to develop,
Right.
to evolve,
Okay.
even to potentially transform into something
Yeah.
completely different than what you initially imagined.
So, like, let those ideas simmer a bit.
Yeah. Serpil describes it as entering the island of HYP.
Island of HYP,
I love that.
where you play with what-if questions
Mm.
without judgment. So we're basically giving ourselves permission to daydream,
Yes,
to let those ideas simmer without the pressure of having to produce something concrete.
precisely. It's about embracing uncertainty, trusting your intuition,
Okay.
letting those ideas marinate in the back of your mind. But how do we know when an idea is fully incubated? When is it time to move from this creative exploration to actually bringing those ideas to life?
That's where Serpil emphasizes the importance of intuition. He describes it as a voice speaking across time, trusting that gut feeling about when an idea is ready to be harvested.
Intuition, that can be a tricky thing. How do we cultivate that sense of knowing when to move forward?
This is where he introduces a really fascinating concept called the 24-hour mind. He suggests that by allowing ideas to process through different states of consciousness, from that flow state where we're fully immersed, to our conscious mind where we're actively thinking, even down to our subconscious and unconscious mind, where things are simmering below the surface, we can unlock new insights and connections.
So even when we're not consciously working on an idea, our brains are still making connections behind the scenes. That's pretty powerful. But it also suggests that we need to give our ideas time and space to develop.
Exactly. Serpil argues that by not rushing the process, by allowing our 24-hour mind to do its work, we can tap into a much deeper well of creativity. He even mentions that some of his biggest breakthroughs came when he stepped away from an idea and allowed it to percolate in the background.
So sometimes the best way to move forward is to step back. I think that's something we can all relate to. That feeling of getting stuck and needing to shift gears, to gain a fresh perspective. But I'm curious to know more about how we can actively nurture those ideas during that incubation stage. What are some practical tips that he offers?
One thing he emphasizes is revisiting those index cards regularly, adding new thoughts and connections as they arise. He also talks about deliberately exposing ourselves to new experiences, whether it's reading a book on a completely different topic, taking a walk in nature, or having a conversation with someone outside our usual circle. These seemingly unrelated experiences can spark unexpected connections and really fuel our creative process.
It's like cross-pollinating our minds, bringing in fresh perspectives to fertilize those seeds of ideas.
Exactly. And he reminds us that incubation doesn't mean passively waiting for inspiration to strike. It's about actively engaging with our ideas,
Right.
experimenting, playing, and allowing those aha moments to emerge.
That makes a lot of sense. But I'm also curious about that harvest stage that you mentioned earlier. How do we know when it's time to move from this creative exploration to actually putting those ideas into action?
Well, Serpil talks about the harvest stage as the transition from creativity to productivity. It's about recognizing when an idea is ripe, when it's time to move from that ideation to implementation. He offers some specific strategies for making this transition, which I think we can explore further.
I'm all ears.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this whole tangible thinking system works.
Yeah.
We capture those fleeting thoughts, we identify the seeds of potential,
Hmm.
we give them time to incubate,
That's right.
and then what? How do we know when it's time to move on to the final stage?
Okay.
The harvest.
Ah, that's the art of it, isn't it?
It is.
It's about sensing that shift
Okay.
from pure creativity
Yeah.
to a more focused, productive energy.
Got it.
It's like knowing when the fruit is ripe for the picking.
So how do we cultivate that awareness? Are there any signs we should be looking for?
Sometimes it's a sudden burst of clarity,
Oh, okay.
like a light bulb going off in your head.
Right.
Other times it's a more gradual feeling of readiness,
Hmm.
like you've been marinating on an idea long enough,
Yes, yeah.
and now you're eager to start bringing it to life.
It's like that moment
Yeah.
when you've been brainstorming for hours
Uh-huh.
and suddenly everything just clicks into place.
Exactly. And Serpil stresses.
Yeah.
Progress over perfection is key here.
Oh, I needed to hear that.
Don't get bogged down
Yeah.
by trying to make everything perfect
I do that.
right out of the gate.
Yes. That's the trap I fall into all the time.
It's easy to do.
I get so caught up in the details that I lose sight of the bigger picture.
Happens to the best of us.
But the harvest stage is all about taking action,
Yes.
about making those ideas tangible.
It might be messy at first,
Okay.
but that's okay.
It's about getting those ideas out of our heads and into the world.
Exactly. And who knows?
Right.
Maybe that messy first draft will lead to something
Yeah.
truly brilliant down the road. Let's dive into how we can reap the rewards of all this tangible thinking and bring those ideas to life. Okay, so we've nurtured these ideas, we've let them simmer in our 24-hour mind, we've experimented and explored, but how do we know when it's time to actually move from incubate to harvest? How do we decide which ideas are ready to be picked and which ones need a little more time to ripen on the vine?
It's a really crucial transition, and Serpil doesn't offer like hard and fast rules. It's a very personal process, driven by intuition, experience, and really understanding your goals.
So no magic formula, just trusting our gut and knowing what we're aiming for. But are there any tips that Serpil offers to guide us in this decision-making process?
Yeah, he does suggest asking yourself a few key questions. The first being, is this idea aligned with my overall vision and goals? It's easy to get excited about a shiny new concept, but if it doesn't fit into that bigger picture of what you're trying to achieve, maybe it's better to let it go or, put it on the back burner.
Makes sense. We need to be selective about which ideas we really invest our time and energy in. What other questions does he suggest we ask?
He also recommends thinking about the feasibility of the idea. Do you have the resources, the skills, the support to actually bring it to life? Sometimes an idea might be brilliant, but the timing isn't right or the resources just aren't there. Recognizing those limitations can save you a lot of frustration later on.
So it's about being realistic about what we can actually accomplish, even if the idea itself is amazing. Are there any other questions that can help us figure out, which ideas are ready for harvest?
One more he highlights is thinking about the potential impact. Will this idea make a difference? Will it solve a problem, create value, or inspire others? He encourages us to think beyond our own satisfaction and consider the ripple effect that our ideas could have on the world.
Yeah, that's a powerful reminder that our creativity can have a purpose beyond ourselves. But once we've identified those ideas, the ones that align with our goals, that seem feasible and have that potential for impact, how do we move them from incubation to actually harvesting them?
Well, Serpil offers a bunch of different strategies, and they really depend on the nature of the idea and your personal style. Yeah, he emphasizes that the harvest stage is all about action. It's about taking those tangible thoughts and actually translating them into something real.
So what are some examples of how we might actually harvest those ideas?
For some ideas, it might be about creating a detailed plan, like outlining the steps, the resources, and the timeline needed to bring it to life. For others, it might be about building a prototype, creating a rough draft, or sharing the idea with a trusted group for feedback. The key is to take those index cards, those sketches, those brainstorm thoughts, and actually move them into a format that lets you take action.
It's like those index cards become stepping stones, leading us from the world of ideas to the world of action. That's a really cool visual. Serpil also mentions this idea of near futurism, which seems to connect back to that question of impact. What's he getting at there?
He describes near futurism as a way of using design thinking to create solutions for the challenges we're facing today, envisioning a future that's not too far off a future we can actively shape through our ideas and our actions.
So it's about applying this tangible thinking process to make a real positive impact on the world to create a better future.
Exactly. He believes that by engaging in this process of moving our thoughts from our heads to our hands, we can unlock not only our own creative potential, but also our collective capacity to solve problems and build a better world. He encourages us to think bigger, to think beyond our immediate needs, and consider how our ideas might contribute to a more sustainable, more equitable, and more inspiring future.
That's a really inspiring message. It suggests that tangible thinking isn't just about, personal productivity or creative expression. It's about harnessing our creativity to make a difference.
It is a powerful reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping the future, and that our ideas, when nurtured and brought to life, can have a ripple effect far beyond ourselves.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into tangible thinking, from escaping the digital deluge to tapping into our 24-hour mind, from the simplicity of the Trinity to the power of near futurism. There's so much here to inspire and empower us to unlock our creative potential.
Yeah, it's a really rich and multifaceted approach, and I hope this deep dive has provided some valuable insights and practical tools for our listeners to explore.
I'm sure it has. And for you, listener, we leave you with this final thought. As Serpil suggests, embrace the journey of finding your own mind mark, your own unique way of making your thoughts tangible. Experiment play. Discover the tools and techniques that resonate with you and see where this process of tangible thinking leads you. Perhaps you'll uncover not only your own creative spark, but also the power to shape a brighter future. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.